Now is it working? I might have hit the wrong button.
Let me see.
It should be working now.
Yep.
Now is it working?
You're going to get some feedback there, but we're on. We got sound now.
All right. I hit the wrong button.
To the RotoViz Live. Definitely, real quick before we get started, make sure if you're not subscribing to RotoViz, you can subscribe through the viewer discount, 30% discount, rotoviz.com/podcast. That's the podcast discount. You can also subscribe to our great NBA content, which has just started up. You can go through rotoviz.com/NBA podcast to get a discount to our NBA DFS content as well. And then NASCAR season's coming to a close now, but you can definitely keep an eye out for NASCAR for next year as well. But we were discussing a little bit here about, now we have kind of an echo on our audio.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Do you have the YouTube page open at all?
I do not.
Okay.
I just have our Wirecast, and I'm muted when you're talking, so I don't know. I think there's a little humming coming from your end.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
No, I can't hear you now. It didn't work.
You can't hear me? Uh-oh.
No, I was gone. Maybe we're just, maybe my volume's too loud. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to turn the volume down. Let's see if that's better.
You said it's not bad, and you sound fine, so it must be me. It might just be my volume's up too high.
Yeah, I think your volume's up too high because I'm getting the echo from your end.
Well, hopefully that's not too abrasive for our viewers, but we should probably get going into our discussion. We were kicking off before we had sound with the Kansas City running back situation, discussing obviously that they are kind of that Charkandrick West is kind of the chalk now. It's something that we weren't able to discuss on Thursday. We didn't have that information yet when we recorded this week, but that's that is what it is. You're going to be playing him in cash games. And then we were just kind of discussing whether or not to fade him in GPPs. You said that you won't be playing 100%, but you won't be fading him certainly.
Yeah, I'll be about equal weight to the field with him, I would think. So based off of what I've been constructing lineups as of right now.
Great. Yeah, I think I'm going to be similar. I'm definitely going to take some shots in lineups without him. That offense being run by Nick Foles, I think there's some potential for some game theory there where if that offense really does struggle and you're off him, you can get substantial jump on a substantial group portion of the field there by not playing West if that offense does hit some troubles this week. But in other big news this morning, we have probably the likelihood that Ben Roethlisberger is going to play. How are you approaching the Steelers pass game?
I'm very happy that Roethlisberger is playing. I have a decent amount of him in GPP. I don't have an overwhelming amount, but I'm definitely going to be overweight compared to what I think the field will be because I think they'll still be concerned about his knee. But that doesn't concern me. He's going to be fine. I've had, like I said, the exact same knee injury. We talked about it earlier in the week, and I was back on the soccer field in 3 weeks, and that was a little bit different than being just a pocket passer. So I think Ben's going to be just fine. I really like Antonio Brown, Sammy Coates, and Le'Veon Bell all as GPP plays this week. And I think, the Vegas agrees the total has come up from 43.5 up to 46.5, 47, depending on which book you're looking at. But so that's good. And it also actually means both team totals have come up. Even the Baltimore team total has come up as well, which makes me like Dennis Pitta even more than we already did before. So I really like Dennis Pitta as a comeback play to that passing game. And hey, if Terrence West gets things going as well, that's also a good comeback play. I would do either Pitta or Terrence West as the comeback play to that Steelers pass offense, because if the Ravens are leading, then that might come through Terrence West. And if they're trailing, that could mean Dennis Pitta gets a lot of work.
Yeah, we talked about this situation a lot on Thursday, so we shouldn't spend too much time on it. This is actually my story time because we mentioned how the early lines had an implied total for Pittsburgh at about 20 points, and my story time was that they'd blow past that, and you could onslaught with the Steelers offense this week. The main reason is the Pittsburgh offense has scored a higher percentage of points. The main couple of reasons. They've scored a higher percentage of points via passing TDs as a percentage of their total points scored than any team in the NFL, and the Ravens have conceded a higher percentage of points via passing TDs as a percentage of the total points that team has conceded, a higher percentage than any team in the NFL as well. So you have a matchup where any points that Pittsburgh scores in this game, you would expect to come through the air. I mean, that's what the trends would tell us. And then further to that point, you have the Ravens defense as the number one rush defense in DVOA. You have them 14th in pass defense in DVOA per Football Outsiders. So you have definitely a setup where, I mean, yes, Roethlisberger's coming off an injury, but you have a setup where this should be a game where they are attacking through the air. And I think a Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, Michael Thomas, Sammy Coates, and Le'Veon Bell stack is very much in play. Bell has averaged over 9 targets over his 4 games this year. So he's very much going to be involved, even if he's not heavily used in the running game. He's going to be very involved in the passing game. So still a very good option. Where should we go next? What other news or situations do you want to discuss here?
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to. I had on the Play of the Week article that we do on RotoViz every week. I actually picked both Cam Newton and Kelvin Benjamin, and then of course shortly after was news that Jermaine Johnson, the cornerback for Los Angeles, who's very good, who's been out the last 3 weeks when LA's lost their last 3 games, might actually play this weekend. So that would really temper my expectations on Kelvin Benjamin. However, that would make Ted Ginn a very viable play. He's going to be the one that looks to play on the outside opposite of Kelvin Benjamin. So I think he could get a couple deep balls because he'll be opposite Kelvin Benjamin, who's going to be basically marked by Tremaine Johnson, and then he'll have a great matchup with either Troy Hill or EJ Gaines on the outside, and so I think he could beat them deep. So if you're going to play Cam Newton, I would look at stacking with Ted Ginn. If Tremaine Johnson does play, and if he doesn't play, I would look at stacking him with Kelvin Benjamin. So that's going to be the big news. And unfortunately, that's an afternoon game. So I think that's a situation where if you're constructing DFS lineups, you really need to be paying attention to even as the games are going on. So like on a site like DraftKings, where you have the late swap, I would definitely be using that if you're playing any Cam Newton lineups. Definitely.
That kind of calls into question something that I've been considering a lot as it pertains to Darius Slay. When you have a cornerback coming off a multi-week injury like this, and in particular what Darius Slay might mean for Stephon Diggs' outlook this week, are you at all considering that they might be a little bit limited or a little bit less effective than in general? It sounds like you're pretty confident that Johnson will be a pretty good matchup, or at least a downgrade for Kelvin Benjamin because of his role. Do you ever give any weight to that? Because that's something I've been considering this week a little bit with Slay.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely the chance that he could be limited, or even if he plays the whole time, he might not be 100%. So Kelvin Benjamin isn't maybe necessarily a complete fade regardless. Plus, he won't be necessarily 100% matched up against Tremaine Johnson. So he still could see some of the plus matchups against those other poor outside corners for the Rams. So I think that's definitely something to consider, and we'll just have to keep following the news all the way up until lineup lock, especially for the afternoon games. But that's something I kind of wanted to get on our radar early so that we're thinking about it as we kind of go into the rest of the show and then the rest of the day, because that's something, if you're building lineups now, you want to have as much time as possible to know about these types of situations.
Yep, definitely, and have some pivots in mind as well. We do want to kind of decrease exposure, but I think that's a great call, particularly, when you made it earlier in the week to be on Benjamin and Newton. I think that's going to be a little bit of an under-owned stack and option this week with them traveling across the country and a lot of other passing games that people are heavily on. We have a question in the chat about Jay Ajayi. The question is, can he have a better than average game? He's obviously in a tough matchup playing against the Jets this week. That's a tough matchup for running backs. They're kind of a funnel defense. They're a D that you're going to see be attacked through the air more. I know you like Kenny Stills this week and some of the deeper options, or you mentioned that earlier. But I also saw you mentioned something about wind in this game. So what are your thoughts on how Miami attacks it offensively and where Ajayi and some of the passing game options stand?
Yeah, actually, I have been using a decent amount of Ajayi because we saw similar with when David Johnson actually played the Jets. He just went crazy on them. And yeah, they're a funnel defense, but I think that's not as difficult as a defense like Seattle that's good both against the run and the pass. So if the passing game can be somewhat efficient, then that can help open things up for Ajayi. And I think the passing game could be efficient. Even though it's going to be windy, I think the deep ball might not be efficient, but I think we could see a lot of Jarvis Landry now because of the wind situation. So that could open up things for Ajayi. And it is a tough matchup, but Ajayi did just put up 200 yards in back-to-back games, and one of those games wasn't exactly the easiest of matchups against Buffalo, so division rival there as well. So I think he has a chance to put up another 100-yard rushing game. I wouldn't expect 200 yards, but I think he could very easily exceed 3x value at his 6K price tag, especially because this could end up being a game where teams might need to rely on the run a little bit more because of the wind.
Yeah, and I think he makes a good leverage play too. I mean, he's going to be a little bit higher owned, but so is the Miami passing game. I think they're not going to be super high owned, but I think there has been a lot of talk of Ryan Tannehill as an interesting play this week. Some of the passing options, obviously, you mentioned Jarvis Landry is going to be pretty high owned, I believe. So I think Ajayi, you're going to get a little bit lower ownership percentage than you normally would with a guy who is coming off 200-yard games in a row. The wind, I just pulled it up. It's looking like it's only going to be about 15 down to about 13 miles an hour today. So
yeah, it depends on the site you look at. I've seen it going from 15 up to 16 by the end of the game, and 15 is right around that spot where you really want to be avoiding it if you're playing players who are deep threats. So Stills especially, and even Devontae Parker a bit. I think that definitely knocks them down a little bit. And I think it bumps up Jarvis Landry a little bit because it might be harder to throw the deep ball. So it's right around that point where I'd be concerned about it.
Okay, that's fair. But I do think, yeah, to your point on Ajayi, that's someone that we mentioned in the Thursday pod as well. You're getting a hot hand guy. You're getting an opportunity to kind of leverage the passing game that might be a little bit higher owned than a Miami passing game would normally be. And this team has run the ball just a ton the last few weeks. I mean, it could easily be a situation where they're just having had an identity shift and are more comfortable running the ball significantly going forward and taking the ball out of Ryan Tannehill's hands a little bit more. So I think there's definitely potential for Ajayi to have a very strong game this week. He's not someone to use in cash, but he's certainly a GPP option. How about any other games you want to switch over to real quick? I'm going to check the hashtag, see if we got any questions there.
I'm looking at the hashtag right now, and there's nothing there. Okay. Let's try another one of these early games. So we talked about Kansas City's running backs, but what do you think about the game in general? I mean, I think I have my opinions, but I'm kind of curious as to what you think, aside from just Chark-Kendrick West.
That's the KC game. I mean, I'm worried about Nick Foles, to be honest. I'm worried about Foles. I just don't think he's a very good quarterback. I don't think it's a situation where we should be really, really confident in their offense. At the same time, I'm not confident in Jacksonville's offense, so I don't really know what to make of it. I'm definitely playing the Chiefs D in some spots. I'm playing West. I think that he'll catch some passes. I was looking at Foles' history to try and see whether there was a noticeable downtick in running back targets, because we know that Alex Smith likes to check down a lot, and whether we should expect a few fewer running back targets with Smith not in. But Foles has definitely thrown to his running backs a fair amount in his history. He obviously ran the Chip Kelly offense, and they like to feature the running backs in the passing game. So, I mean, I don't think Foles is a significant downgrade in terms of passing game volume to West. So I'm fine with West. I'm not real confident in any of the other passing game options for the Chiefs because of Foles. And on the Jacksonville side, I'm definitely, I have some Allen Robinson this week. I'm kind of pot committed with him. His price has come down so far. He's definitely cost me some money this year, but he's getting a ton of volume. I still think he's a very good young receiver, and I feel like there has to be some bounce back at some point. But it's kind of that's just kind of me being not wanting to miss the week when he does blow up. I don't know that he's necessarily a great option. What's your take on Jacksonville?
Yeah, well, I'm using Foles in GPPs.
Okay.
So I like the situation here. Jacksonville is pretty bad at stopping the pass. And I mean, I know they have Jalen Ramsey, who's a pretty good cornerback, and but he's still a rookie. He does get beat sometimes, and the slot matchup there is really good. So Tyreek Hill going against Devon House, that's a tasty matchup. So if you want, and this is hat tip to Fantasy ADHD, he's posted some of these like interesting charts about it as well. But I think Tyreek Hill and Nick Foles is a really interesting GPP play for some high variance, and then play a lot of chalk around it. That's a really interesting lineup. As far as the Jacksonville side, I also like. I like both Allen Robinson and Allen Hurns this week. They've got a little bit different offensive coordinator now, so another situation where the offensive coordinator they have now didn't like to, when he was back in Buffalo, I can't remember his name, but he didn't like to throw to his offense wasn't run through the wide receiver beyond like this wide receiver 2. So the wide receiver 3, like Marquise Lee, he's off my radar. They did like to throw a lot to the tight ends. So when he was at Buffalo, Scott Chandler led the team in targets 1 year, and then Fred Jackson led the team in targets 1 year. So I like to throw the tight end and the running back. So that makes it kind of interesting there. I think TJ Yeldon might have some sleeper potential, but I'm really just kind of targeting Allen Robinson with a little bit of Allen Hurns is there as well. At 4,900, I think that's a pretty good price tag for Allen Hurns.
Hurns, interesting, yeah. Are you on the Chiefs defense at all, given that they're facing Blake Bortles, or is that something that you're kind of fading? Because I think they're going to be pretty popular.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the Chiefs defense when I'm not playing Jacksonville lineup. So it's kind of also a nice way to hedge as well. If I am playing Jacksonville, whether it's Allen Robinson or Allen Hurns or somebody like that, I'm not using the Chiefs D, but in a lot of my other lineups, I am using the Chiefs D. So it gives me a bit of a hedge in that regard. I think, Chiefs against Blake Bortles is a tasty matchup. And then if Tyreek, if Tyreek can break one or something like that, that's always good as well. So for the special teams part. So I definitely think the Chiefs D. Oh, and I forgot to mention Travis Kelce, obviously with Macklin banged up and unsure of his status right now. I think Travis Kelce is a good play as well.
Yeah, Hill's someone I've heard a few times this week. He's obviously had some flashy plays the last couple of weeks. I'm probably going to be off him this week, but I think that's an interesting name. But that kind of just goes to my confidence in Foles versus yours. So I think that's someone to definitely consider, but just wanted to get my thoughts in there that I'm probably not going to be on him. Got another question here. Who do we think will be the highest scoring Saints wide receivers this week? For me, Brandon Cooks has really big home road splits. They're playing in an outdoor stadium, and just on price point alone, you can get Michael Thomas a lot cheaper. He had some weird injury designations this week, but he's supposed to be a full go. He's off the injury report at this point, so I think he's definitely an option. He's been one of the bigger red zone options this year. I also think Willie Snead is an interesting name, fairly cheap, and I think early in the year we saw him have a couple big games. He's been not as involved lately. He's going to be probably the lowest owned of the 3 Saints receivers, and he's somebody that I'm on quite a bit this week as a potential and a contrarian option for the Saints offense.
Yeah, sorry, I was unmuting. I'm on Cooks really only as my only Saints play from the passing game. I do have a little bit of Hightower as well. Yes, but I think I'm probably going to try to work in maybe even an Ingram in one lineup or two. But by and large, if I'm playing the pass game from New Orleans, I'm just going with Cooks. I think he's going to be the chalk play from that offense, but he's also the one who probably has the best opportunity to have a big game. So again, Fantasy ADHD put up a lot of these plots, and it showed how Cooks almost lined up perfectly with the San Francisco defense in terms of what they've allowed. So it's a very good matchup for him. I don't know if it helps him a lot, because this is something I've been working on now, where if you have a really good matchup, it helps a bad player a lot more than it helps a good player, because a good player is already good and he's already almost matchup proof in some ways. But it does help Cooks. It obviously doesn't hurt him. It definitely helps him, but I don't think it helps him a ton. But that still just means he's a very good option, because it means he's probably more likely to at least hit that ceiling we want from him.
Fair enough. Yeah, so a little bit of a difference in opinion there. Got another question about Diggs in cash. I tend to do a couple different cash lineups. I know a lot of people don't. Some that I mentioned before, I just like to split it up a little bit when I'm a little bit close on different plays. Diggs is definitely in a couple of my cash lineups. I think he's a very good play this week. The issue that I'm having with going all in on him is just it's an ownership percentage thing. He's right there on DK, priced right with Devonta Adams and Ty Montgomery, who are going to be two of the highest owned receivers this week in cash lineup. So basically, you're either trying to fit all three of them in, or you're which is doable. They're mid-priced in that range. And actually, Dante Moncrief's right there too as well, who's going to be high owned as well. But if you are going to Diggs, there's the potential that you're coming off one of those guys. So I'm trying to kind of hedge that a little bit. I don't want to be off those guys a ton either, because I do really like Montgomery and Adams this week as well. How are you approaching Diggs, and are you playing him in cash at all?
I'm not using him in my cash lineup, although I don't think he's a terrible cash game option. You mentioned both Adams and Montgomery. Currently, I have them both plugged into my cash game lineup, and it's not because I don't like Diggs. I think Diggs is a very good play. I think he is very much cash potential. I think he's underpriced. But I'm trying to absorb as much of this, 54-point total, with the Packers being a 7-point favorite. The implied team total there is over 30 points. I'm trying to absorb as much of that as I can. And the way my roster construction worked out, I'm actually not using Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback in cash games, so I'm trying to absorb it up with a wide receiver position. So that's what I'm doing. But I think Diggs is a fine cash game play if you have other options that you're looking at. I'm using him in GPP. I think he's a great GPP play. I think he's also a great kind of, in a way, a bit of a leverage play off Rudolph, who I think is going to be the chalk tight end this week.
Yeah, definitely. In the Diggs lineups, I should say I'm not playing both him and Rudolph. I'm playing Gates in those lineups. I have come around. Earlier in the week, we were discussing potential Sam Bradford, Rudolph, Diggs stacks. I'm not on that. I don't really want to play Sam Bradford, frankly. I just don't think he's that great. That's just where I got to.
Hey, they made Case Keenum look good, so I've got a couple Sam Bradford, Diggs, Rudolph stacks, or just one or the other of those two with Sam Bradford. But I'm
definitely a great spot for him. I won't deny that. I just kind of decided that there's a lot of quarterbacks I like this week, some of the cheap quarterbacks that I like, and didn't want to go in on Bradford.
Well,
I am on.
Let's talk about that. What cheap quarterbacks are you on? Because I'm really only on Bradford and Foles.
Colin Kaepernick, I think, is he's in an interesting matchup. We talked about him a little bit on Thursday or on Wednesday when we talked. Good matchup on the ground for San Francisco, and then you also have Carlos Hyde out now, so I think there's some potential for him to run for quite a bit. And then the Saints can't really defend the pass very well, so I have him as a decent low-priced option. And then let me look really quick. I was looking at Tannehill in some lineups. I'm going to jump in here real quick and give you the other names that I'm on there. And I don't think Bradford's a bad play necessarily. I mean, we discussed that matchup. It's a phenomenal matchup. You talked a little bit about how they made Case Keenum look really good. The Lions, that is, and I'm totally in agreement that he's a strong play this week from a matchup standpoint, but I just haven't really wanted to get into some stacks with him because I just don't think that offense, if they get ahead, I don't expect them to throw a ton. I mean, I know Detroit's going to give them a little bit of tempo up potential in that matchup. So I think it's a fine play. It's just, and I'm going to be pulling for him because I have Diggs and Rudolph everywhere, but I'm not stacking him necessarily. The other options I was considering, mainly just Kaepernick and Tannehill in my lineups here for cheaper options.
Yeah, I'm really off Tannehill because of the wind. So I'm off Tannehill because of the wind. I was on him so much this week, and then 15-mile-an-hour winds, 16-mile-an-hour winds, depending on the site you look at. That's a little too risky for me. Even going up against the Jets, I think it definitely reduces the potential for this game to be explosive. So I'm off Tannehill as a GPP play, and it pains me because I was all over him earlier in the week, and I was really excited about playing Tannehill and Stills. Like that was my go-to this week, as I was really creating lineups early in the week. And Kaepernick, I like Kaepernick. I didn't end up working him in any of my lineups because you can only fit so many lineups and quarterbacks and different things like that. But I don't mind Kaepernick at all. I like that.
Tannehill's a good point though, because if you couple that with the fact that they've been run heavy, the last couple of weeks, and I kind of think there's some potential for them to just come out and continue to run the ball, even though it's not really the optimal move against the Jets D. I do think that that's where they found the most success as an offense this year, and they've done it a couple weeks in a row, and they might just continue to pound that. So I'm not in love with Tannehill at all for that reason. When you add in the wind, I mean, he's definitely an interesting fade. Dak Prescott's the other name that I was forgetting here. It's a little bit more expensive, but I think he's a good play as well.
Yeah, I think Dak is perfectly fine. I'm not using him. I'm trying to play the Dallas game a little bit differently than most. I mean, obviously I'm using Zeke, but if I'm not using Zeke, I'm actually trying to get a bit of Dez Bryant in there and just play either Zeke or Dez. That's kind of what I've been doing. I really feel like, Dez was strong last week. Dak was looking for him. He had double-digit targets, and so against Cleveland, I think Dez has a 2-touchdown game in him possibly. I think Zeke has a 2-touchdown game in him possibly, but we don't know who it's going to be. So I think when I'm not using Zeke, Dez is a really good, kind of leverage off of him if Zeke doesn't put up the 2 touchdowns and Dez does. So that's kind of how I'm playing that game, and that's where I'm kind of getting my Dallas exposure. So there's nothing wrong with Dak. I'm just playing the game a little bit differently because I think Dak will be a little too popular. They might be so run heavy with Zeke that they don't need to use Dak as much.
And that's fair. And I should definitely clarify, I'm paying up in QB in most of my lineups. I really like Rodgers. We just got a question here that said, struggling with all those guys you just said, is it too risky to play Adams, Tymo, and Rodgers in cash? I have cash lineups with all 3 of those guys. I don't think it's too risky. I think Rodgers is in a phenomenal spot this week. They throw a ton in the red zone right now. They don't have a rushing game. He's throwing a ton, period. I think both Adams and Tymo are phenomenal plays independent of Rodgers. I'm a little bit concerned about Montgomery. After the surprise inactive last week, I think he'll be active in play, but I don't know how much of a snap share he'll play. I mean, I think a lot of people are expecting, because they don't have other running backs, that he's going to be in the backfield a ton. If he's really has some type of ailment, I think there's potential that he only plays 75% or 50% of the snaps. But then I'm looking at the matchup and going, okay, even if he's only playing 50% of the snaps, I'd expect him to get 8 targets maybe. Like, he's going to be active out of the backfield. So he's a really tough guy to fade. I'm a little concerned about his ceiling because I don't expect him to play 100% of the snaps necessarily, but I do think he's a good cash game play.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like Devontae Adams more of the 2. I think the matchup is great. Obviously, Jordy is going to be shadowed by Vontae Davis. There's questions about whether Randall Cobb will play. It looks like he probably won't even play. And so Devontae Adams just has a really tasty matchup. And Ty Montgomery, you're right, maybe his ceiling isn't as high. There's some concern there. But I'm even using him in GPPs because if other people are concerned about that, maybe it'll depress his ownership just enough that he is a good GPP play if for some reason he is 100% in full go and has a huge Ty Montgomery game that he's done before in this hybrid running back, wide receiver-ish type role.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Another question, thoughts on Jordy and Adams in same cash lineup? I'm off Jordy in cash. I just don't like that matchup with Vontae Davis.
Yeah, too much risk there with Vontae Davis. You don't want risk in cash games as much as you can avoid it. So I wouldn't use Jordy in cash.
What do I do to change so I can get a defense in this lineup? Need around 1,500 in salary with Mariota, Zeke, Bell, Cooks, Diggs, Tymont, C. West, and Rudolph. You're going with both Zeke and Bell. Brandon Cooks. I mean, for me, I would probably come off Cooks and I would go down to Michael Thomas or Willie Snead. I think they have similar potential this week, and you're just kind of paying up for the higher option in a passing offense that could potentially see a split option. But I know you have a different opinion on that. So is there a different way you would approach that?
What's the exact question? Like, what are we trying to do? Kind of
Mario. So we have a lineup without a defense, doesn't have enough in salary to fill out the defense. So we have Mariota, Zeke, Bell.
Do you know how much is left over in salary?
Need about 1,500 in salary to get to a defense.
So Cooks is 7,500. I like Cooks. I would probably drop down from him and maybe play somebody like a Demaryius Thomas or a Diggs or something like that. And then you can fit in a defense. So
yeah, already has Diggs in the lineup, but yeah, totally.
Already has Diggs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so Demaryius or one of the Green Bay guys we've talked about, if they're not both already being used, I think another guy. Yep, Moncrief at 5,800 is a guy I'm looking at. And I wouldn't even mind a bit of Jordan Matthews this week. It's going to be windy there, so I probably would avoid him, actually. But that's another game that is high wind. So speaking of high wind, actually, I think so hopefully that answered the question. I like kind of Demaryius Thomas and Moncrief of probably the two best options if you already have Diggs in there. As far as win goes, I think that probably helps the defenses as well. So I've been using Miami defense a lot in my lineups this week because, Fitzpatrick has shown he could throw some interceptions, and if a ball gets blown up in the air a little bit on maybe a deeper pass to Marshall or somebody, that could help with defense. And so I also think that makes both the Eagles and Giants pretty interesting defense plays as well.
Yeah, I'm just kind of laughing at the thought of Fitzpatrick plus wind. I mean, I think that's a pretty smart play. You already got Fitzpatrick being pretty questionable in terms of where he puts balls in some interesting spots, and if you have some wind added.
Yeah, I kind of want to chime in on that. I think how we always do the defensive running back stack. I actually think you can do the defense and Jarvis Landry stack. Kind of this extension of the running game thing. But like if you get a couple of those turnovers, Jarvis Landry could have 15 targets for 10 catches on 15 targets for 120 yards and a touchdown or something. So he definitely has upside in this game. I was off Jarvis Landry earlier in the week, but with this win, it's really made me change how I want to approach this game. So that's something. Just a good lesson is to always be adaptable. Don't make your mind up early in the week and be 100% stuck on it. We always have to be adaptive to the situations that we've got playing as the weekend approaches.
Yeah, and to that point about Landry's upside, I mean, this is something that I consider often. I wrote an article actually for RotoWorld this offseason about the kind of how much upside there are in some of these possession receivers when they have really high reception games on DraftKings, particularly. I think it was the top 19 highest scoring DraftKings games over the last 3 years had 8 or more receptions. When you get a guy like that, and if the win causes him to see something like 15 targets, when you get a guy like that catching double-digit passes, you have a ton of upside. You're going to probably almost certainly hit the 100-yard bonus. You're going to have 10 reception points. You're going to have 100 receiving yard points. You're going to have a 3-point bonus plus any additional receiving. And then also, when a guy's catching that many passes, he's likely going to have some potential to score. Even if you think Jarvis Landry doesn't have a high potential to score, I think he is going to get in the end zone again here pretty quick. I don't think you're going to see him finish with 2 touchdowns on the year this year. So I think he's a phenomenal play this week, and I think he has plenty of upside. He's a guy that can hit 30 points pretty easily just through accumulation of stats on a lot of those short completions. People hate that. They don't think that's like, real football skill, but it's great for DraftKings fantasy scoring.
Yeah, they think it's not talent, which it might not be. I mean, I don't know how talented Jarvis Landry is, let's say, but what he does very well, and it equates to DraftKings scoring, and that's what I care about. Yep,
totally with you on that. What do we think about Terrence West this week? We talked about him a little bit on Thursday. I like him. I think he's a GPP only play. There was talk, particularly before the bye, about Kenneth Dixon being more involved. I don't know, what his snap share is going to be like. If we knew that West was going to play a ton, I would be all over him. But he's in a pretty good spot. I think he'll get plenty of production off whatever carries he does get, but I just don't know how much he'll see. I think he'll be a little bit low owned, and I'm taking some shots with him in GPPs because I think that he could, if he gets enough work, he could have, a 100-yard rushing day and have a strong day against Pittsburgh.
I totally agree. I mean, I'm with you 100%, and I think 4,700 is just a really nice price tag. And he has he's going to be the goal line back probably there, so he always can punch in 1 touchdown, maybe even 2 if they're lucky. And that's really any running back who gets the goal line work and gets at least 60% of the overall touches is a guy who you should be considering in GPPs because they can always punch in 2 touchdowns, and especially in a game like this and at his price tag. I love Terrence West.
Fantasy ADHD popped in. You were mentioning him a minute ago. He said Steve Smith has an interesting floor at his price if he can go. What do you think about Smith? I think I'm off him because I don't know how healthy he's going to be, but I do usually like him. He's usually underpriced and under-owned because people think he's so old. And he sees a lot of volume. So, I don't hate the call. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's the old inactives watch. Is he gonna play? I don't know if he's even gonna play. Have you heard anything on that yet?
I mean, it looks likely.
It looks likely. Okay.
The stuff that I've heard this morning, it seems like he's trending towards playing. But yeah, I don't think it's a certainty yet.
That's a little disappointing because I would love for him to. I mean, it's good for him. I want him to be healthy, but it's disappointing because of how much pitta I currently have. I don't have a ton of pitta, but I have enough that I probably would want to reduce it a little bit if Steve Smith does play. So, yeah, he is expected to be active. I wouldn't really touch him, even if the matchup is good. I think this isn't like other guys where, you've got your studs who play, and even, maybe in this case, Ty Montgomery, we can even consider a stud, at least because he's so chalky that you can play him because at 75%, he's still probably going to get enough usage and things like that. I think Steve Smith is really not a chalk play. He's not a stud these days. So I would probably just avoid that situation with Steve Smith and just not play him.
Yeah, I think I'm probably off him as well. Another question on that line of thinking, bench Mike Wallace for Kendall Wright with Smith active. So I'm trying to pull up here and see if Smith's officially active at this point. It sounds like he might be, but would you jump over to Kendall Wright? That's from Mocker, so we know it's a Kendall Wright question.
Kendall Wright's at what, 4,400, and who else was the other one?
Mike Wallace.
Wallace is 5,600. This must sound like a seasonal question, but
yeah.
I mean, in DFS, yeah, you can drop down to Kendall Wright, and then you can find, $1,200 extra of value. In season long with Steve Smith active, I would probably do the same thing as well. I think I'd probably go with Kendall Wright because it will siphon just enough targets off of Mike Wallace. And Kendall Wright's matchup isn't too bad this week. It's against San Diego. They struggle covering the slot position a little bit. So I mean, they're not terrible, but they're also not great. So I think it's a decent matchup.
Yeah, so he noted that Smith is active and it is a redraft question. I agree. I would go with Wright. He said if it helps, the other guy has Mike Evans, so he's already probably trailing pretty significantly here.
Yeah. Then I would look to Kendall Wright's kind of big game ability here.
He has that potential as well.
Although there is the Mike Wallace, there's always the Mike Wallace revenge factor against Pittsburgh. So,
ooh,
there you go. Little bit of narrative street.
Yeah. How are we feeling about Chris Conley this week? I think if you want to play Chris Conley, you should type in Tyreek Hill, but I don't really like either of them. I
love Tyreek Hill. I don't like Chris Conley this week. I'm just not gonna play Chris Conley. He doesn't do anything, but Tyreek Hill I think is a very, very good option in the slot with it's just an awesome slot matchup.
Mm-hmm. Any love for Kaepernick? We mentioned him a little bit ago. I like him, and you mentioned that you like him as well. Just don't have any lineups with him necessarily at this moment, but
correct.
I think he has plenty of upside.
Yeah, I agree.
Doc, and the kicker guy. Who are some under the radar guys for FanDuel this week?
Let's see. Under the radar guys for FanDuel. Let me go over to my other page here. So it's just going to be stalling for a second. I mean, I don't know about under the radar, but I think Dan Bailey is always a good play, and he's got a high team total game here against Cleveland. If Cleveland were to make a game of it, that could make it a little bit interesting. I think you can target what's his name, Justin Tucker for Baltimore. I don't know if these guys are necessarily under the radar. If you want to go under the radar, maybe you go with somebody like Josh Lambo for San Diego. I think this is a game where it could end up being a lot of field goals instead of touchdowns.
I'm going to pull up my the Vegas line deconstruction spreadsheet here and see if
that's a good call.
But let's move forward while I pull that up, and I'll circle back to it when it pulls up. But no more questions here. Anything on the hashtag on Twitter?
No, we have one season-long hashtag on Twitter, so I kind of just replied like, this is a DFS show. But
what do you got while we're stalling here?
Well, it's interesting. So actually, I kind of want to talk about this guy. It's what do we think of Tyrell Williams for the rest of the year? And I'm more like, well, what do we think of him this week? I think he's a great play this week. I think he's even somebody you can consider for cash games. I know he's a little banged up, but he's far less banged up than it sounds like Travis Benjamin is. I think you can consider him in cash. I probably wouldn't do it, but I think you can at least consider him. And then, of course, in GPP, he's a very good option this week.
Yeah, I like Williams too, and for the season, I think he's going to be their number one going forward. I mean, I think he's kind of established himself, and I think he's a good a good option. But I'm with you. I think he's a good play this week. Health is a little bit of a concern, but I definitely have him in some lineups. As far as kickers, I just pulled it up, that deconstructing the Vegas lines things I've been doing, where I look at team scoring and then their matchup defense scoring percentages of the total points, and you look at the implied points, which should consider all the other factors in terms of how many points we would expect a team to score. So if we expect them to score this amount, here's how they generally score their points, and then break it down. Green Bay is the highest for kickers, so Mason Crosby is an option. They have a really high team total. That's really driving that. Indianapolis gives up a little bit higher than average percentage of points through kicking. You have Hauschka at second. You have Cairo Santos third. Justin Tucker is not really under the radar. Philly is fourth. That's Caleb Sturgis. You have Indy, San Diego. So Josh Lambo is up there in the top 10. Dan Bailey's there right after that. So those are some options if you are considering kickers in FanDuel. What else do we have? Okay, we got a few more questions here. I've been playing Parky everywhere thanks to Ben's article. Hey, thanks. Silva likes J-Matt today, but I'm expecting him to be shadowed by Janoris Jenkins. Thoughts? You said you kind of liked him. J-Matt. I'm not really on him this week.
Jordan Matthews?
Yeah.
I liked him, but the wind, I don't really like him. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm kind of off that game, to be honest. I think it might be kind of a gross game.
Yeah, I mean the wind is too high. It could be even higher than the Miami game. So I'm really off the passing games there, and then I'm not really intrigued by the running game. Low total. I'm basically fading it. I know there is some potential love for Sterling Shepard. I'm going to go on my anti-Sterling Shepard rant here for just a minute. If you look at the Pro Football Focus wide receiver cornerback matchup chart, it looks like he has a good matchup with Jalen Mills in the slot. But Mills actually only plays in the slot on 20% of his snaps, his defended routes. They really don't use a lot of slot coverage or nickel coverage. They kind of use a different coverage there in Philly. So he also will see a lot of the safeties, and that's a good matchup. But the problem is Sterling Shepard runs like 80% of his routes short, and Philadelphia is the number one defense against short routes in DVOA. So the only way Shepard's going to get a touchdown is with a long pass, which he runs very few of those routes, and he beats a safety deep, or if he somehow gets the red zone targets, which he has one of this year. So I think Sterling Shepard, the only way he scores is two ways that have been pretty unlikely for him this year. So I'm off Sterling Shepard. I'm off this game completely.
Yeah, the one, I agree with you. I don't have any Shepard. The one name that I don't have any right now, but I'm probably going to stick into a couple lineups here after we get off the air is Odell Beckham, just because, I like to get him in a couple lineups, but that's not really a great take by any means. I don't really have any positive matchup notes or anything like that really make him look fantastic. Question, who scores more today, Tyrell Williams or Golden Tate? For me, it's Tyrell Williams. I'm actually sitting Golden Tate in a dynasty league for Cole Beasley, so that tells you how I feel about him with Ebron and Riddick back. I think Golden Tate, I still think he probably has the potential for a big game, but I don't like the matchup with Minnesota at all. What do you think about Tyrell and Golden Tate?
Tyrell all day for me. It's not a good matchup for Tate. It's not a good matchup for Marvin Jones. If I'm coming back in that game, so we talked about the whole Bradford, Diggs, Rudolph thing. If I'm doing a comeback in that game, it's going to be with Theo Riddick for me.
There you go. Riddick is a great underappreciated option as well. Totally agree with that. How confident are you that DeJuan Harris handles 50% of San Fran's running back touches? High ownership and three-headed RBBC, running back by committee, make him more of a fade than people think, ? I agree. I'm not. So DeJuan Harris is someone we probably should have discussed at the top of the show. It's a great call. He's supposed to get the start now. He's a $3,000 running back getting the start. I think Chip Kelly likes to cycle running backs too much for me. I was trying to figure out how I would, what if I would make any changes with my cash lineup with that new information. I'm not playing him in cash. I don't think he's an option in cash. Simply because I just don't trust it. And, he's very cheap, but I don't trust the workload. And I just don't think that, it's going to make me get off my current cash construction.
I'm with you, man. I totally agree. I don't even know if he gets 50% of the touches. He could get like 40. Jerome could get like 20 or 30, and Mike Davis could get like 20 or 30 or something like that. You could see this awkward three-headed monster split. I wouldn't use it. If you're going to use these cheap backs that are, fill-ins for injuries. You want the ones who are going to get close to workhorse, workloads like a Charkandrick West.
Yep. And Drone, actually, I think he had 5 receptions in their last game. He's going to probably be more involved in the pass game, so that definitely hurts Harris a little bit as well. So, yeah, I'm not really on him at all. I mean, I gave it some thought this morning, but I'm not going to change anything up.
And the matchup's good is the thing. Like, people want to be on it because the matchup with New Orleans is good. And I think the 3 running backs combined could have a good game. You just don't know A, who it's going to come from, and B, if even if the 3 combined have a good game, maybe they rush for 150 yards combined and it's like 60-40-40 or something, or whatever. So it might just not be worth it to touch that ground game at all, even though it is a good matchup.
Yep. Are we taking any shots on either New Orleans running back today? I'm not. If I was, I would be taking one on Ingram. I think the recency bias on Hightower is a little bit much right now. He had a great game. They said they wrote him because he had, there was a lot of talk that Ingram got benched, and then there was that comment that they stuck with Hightower because of how Hightower was playing. It wasn't necessarily a bench Ingram situation. I know, I think Ingram is a pretty emotional player, I would say. I think that's kind of a little bit of a narrative streak, but I think he probably would have been pretty not thrilled about that. I would expect it, this is just going on narrative street, but I would have expected that he had a very physical week in practice and would be used plenty this week. Talking about using the hot hand again this week. I think Ingram's going to be the more owned relative to potential guy because I think he's the better running back in general. I mean, I don't think Hightower's a revelation. He's an older back. He's been in the league for a long time. He had a good week last week, but I'd be on Ingram more. I don't know.
I think it's 50-50 for me. I'm actually going to use a bit of both of them. Okay. I think Ingram did fumble 2 weeks in a row, so it wasn't just the one. It was the end of the game 2 weeks prior as well. So I do think there is something to that. They said they want to get Hightower more work, so there is that as well. I mean, I would expect at least 40% of the running back touches for Hightower, and hey, that means it's kind of similar to San Francisco, but I think you got one less option really in play. And the matchup is so good that I probably will take some shots with them. Unlike San Francisco, I'm not really going to take shots with those guys. I think you could see one of these 2 guys have a 100-yard day and a touchdown, and that would more than make value for one of them. But I wouldn't have a whole lot of shots. I think like 5% owned tops would be where I'd go with these guys.
Fair enough. Do we trust Delaney Walker's groin injury had him out, but just saw on game day he might play? I'm off Delaney this week. Any Delaney for you?
I don't see any reason to play Delaney Walker, given the tight end options there from like 3,700 to 4,000. Witten, Pitta, Barnage, Rudolph, they're all within $400 of each other and $300 of each other, and they're all viable options. You go down to Gates at 3,000, or you go up to Kelsey or even Greg Olsen, who I don't mind this week. I think there's plenty of tight end options. You really don't need to worry about Delaney Walker and his groin.
Yep, agree with that. Just saw a report that said Sproles to be the lead back, and would be surprised if we saw Matthews at all. Does this make Sproles a must-play at his price point in cash? Got a comment on your 60-40-40 split. 60,
no, I said 60-40-40 yards.
Oh, there you go.
And I said 150 yards, and I said 60-40-40, and that only added up to 140. So, arithmetic isn't my strong point. If it's not a differential equation, or if it's not like machine learning or something, I'm not really actually that good at math.
I'm not buying that at all.
It needs to have like Greek letters and stuff.
What's that?
I said it needs Greek letters. Like equations with Greek letters are much easier.
Fair enough. What about Sproles and Matthews? That question. I'm not seeing a report on RotoWorld to that effect.
What's the question?
If Sproles were,
Oh, yeah, Sproles. I think Sproles is a pretty interesting option if Matthews doesn't go at all and Sproles gets the lead workload, because especially with this wind, it's going to be a ground game and it's going to be a short passing game, which I think favors Sproles. So I don't know if I'd use him in cash, but I think in GPPs is a perfectly fine option.
Ooh, we got a note here that Darius Slay is out today. I'm going to be all over Stephon Diggs. I'll just tell you that right now.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't even really matter for me. Slay is just not good anyway, so.
he's pretty solid, but I was concerned about his ability to keep up with Diggs coming off an injury.
He's really not that good.
Okay.
He allows a ton of targets per route run. He allows the second most fantasy points per route run on the team. His Pro Football Focus player grading is good, but that thing is bunk because, you can correlate that with performance at a R squared of negative 0.00009 or something. Like it's pretty bad. So, not an R squared, an R of negative 0.0009. So it doesn't even correlate with performance, but like the fantasy points per routes and the targets per route correlate much better with performance. I've been looking at that throughout the year. Either way, it makes Diggs a great play. Now Diggs is going to have an even better matchup probably than Slay, and Slay already isn't very good. So Diggs is a fantastic option, and I think it's just a really good situation for Minnesota this week. And yeah. I still like Sam Bradford, man. I still like Sam Bradford.
Well, I might have to get onto him now a little bit because I was giving Slay a little bit of credit. I think. I'm going to be all over Diggs. I got
a question here on the Twitter hashtag. So is 100% Chiefs too much on FanDuel? Pivot down option from the Chiefs defense. I think 100% is too much. You never know. I mean, defense is one of those positions where actually like the chalk very often doesn't do very well, or not do very well, but like in terms of a GPP, somebody is going to get a huge touchdown, right? So I think a couple pivot down options would be this Eagles-Giants game. I mentioned the Dolphins. Even I like the Rams if Trumaine Johnson plays, even against Carolina. I think Carolina's struggled a little bit this year, and they've actually allowed a lot of points to opposing defenses. So I think those are some pivot down options from the Chiefs.
Yeah, another one I'm looking at is Green Bay. Evan Silva's on him this week, and he got me kind of interested in them in terms of just pass rush and the Colts' inability to block anyone. We love pressure in terms of picking our defenses. That pressure forces turnovers. It's going to be a high-scoring game, but I think there's some potential for the Packers to get some sacks, potentially generate some turnovers against Luck. So I think they're an interesting pivot down option too. In terms of the 100% question, D is the only position where I'm probably ever considering doing that, but I don't do that. But it does tilt me when I have a really good lineup and I have spread out defense exposure, and the defense I have in that really good lineup gets me 2 points. I mean, sometimes I do consider just dumping one defense in every lineup and hoping that I hit that week, but it's tough.
I disagree with that philosophy just because defense is so random and variable that you want to take those shots at least having a few lineups where you get the defense that goes off. And even if you miss it a little bit, then let's say you don't get the defense that scores 16 points, but you get the defense that scores 9 points. That's not going to hurt you in a GPP. GPPs, I actually, so Max Steinberg, who's a excellent daily fantasy player, and he actually won over $1 million. He made the World Series of Poker final table as well, but he does a series of videos on YouTube at the Daily Fantasy Winners YouTube page, and he showed that like the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, the winning Millie Maker lineups, the defense didn't score more than like 6 points or something. So defense is so unimportant like that. I just would take my shots and hope I get somebody that has a huge day in at least a couple of my lineups. I'm much more focused on the core than I am on my defense.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of my point was it tilts me to no end when I have a strong core and then one of my defenses, because I've spread it out, goes off, not in a lineup that's big, and then I have like a 2-point defense in a lineup that's big.
But so the 2 points won't hurt you.
I usually don't go really heavy on defenses. I tend to spread them out.
Yeah.
But I think the only way to take that variance completely out is to make the exact same lineup 3 or 4 different times and throw 3 or 4 different defenses on it. And I'm not usually doing that. So
I don't do that either, but I don't think that's necessary either. I think it's and that would be if you had 3 or 4 defenses that were in that price range that you like. So I don't worry about defense. I would never go 100% on a defense. That's my philosophy. I would much rather go 100% somewhere else, like a wide receiver or a running back who's super, super obvious or something like that. I mean, the week Devontae Booker was 3,700, 100% on him could have been totally fine,
Yeah, fair enough. We're getting to that point. Do we have any other questions? I don't necessarily see any other big questions. Schefter apparently just announced that Big Ben is starting. That's what we were kind of expecting. So we definitely had some comments on that earlier. I like that passing offense. Steve Smith's officially active.
Yep, I was say same thing. Steve Smith is active. So still waiting on a few other names, but Jeremy Maclin is somebody I'm really trying to figure out if he's going to be active or not, because I'd love to up my percentage on Tyreek Hill and or Travis Kelce if Maclin's inactive. So that's the one I'm really keeping an eye on, at least for DFS.
Both Terrell Pryor and Corey Coleman are active. How are you approaching the Browns against the Cowboys? I'm kind of off them because of the pace down, with the Cowboys I expect the Cowboys to have the ball a lot more and to run the ball and control the ball a little bit more in this game. So I've been a little bit off those guys, but are you playing either of them?
I'm not playing either of those. I do have some Gary Barnage. Other than that, I'm off Cleveland.
Fair enough. Yeah, I really like Pryor, I should say. I had a lot of him last week, but I think that I'm a little concerned about how the targets are going to split with Coleman back, so I kind of want to watch it for a week. What else we got here? We have Devontae Parker active. Does that impact any of your Miami thoughts? You're kind of off that because of the win, correct?
Yeah, the thing we always I remember the Devontae Parker highlights. Like every touchdown, it seems like it's like 20 yards over the middle or 40 yards over the middle or things like that, and that's just not conducive to a high wind game. So I liked Devontae Parker and I liked Kenny Stills before the forecasts had started to kind of creep towards a 15-mile-an-hour wind type game. So it's a little unfortunate, and I think that's just kind of how we have to roll with it. Is realize the wind could impact. It doesn't mean one of these guys can't have a touchdown. It's just going to be a little bit harder, and I'd rather play this particular game thinking that the wind could impact it, because I think it actually, like you mentioned, Tannehill for a cheaper guy could be one of the more popular cheap options.
Yep, fair enough. We have also Macklin as active here in the chat. Thanks a lot, guys, for all the help in the chat. Definitely appreciate all those notes. So, bummer for you on your hope to up the Tyreek and Kelsey exposure, but Macklin will be active.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll still definitely have exposure to them, but I probably won't bump it up.
Fair enough. All right. Jerick McKinnon's officially active. I was kind of expecting him to be more of the lead guy this week. Not on him a ton, but I think I definitely am going to get some of him in some GPPs. I don't think I have him in any lineups yet, but still like that big play potential. He didn't hit earlier when he was kind of the chalk in a cash lineup in a cash week, the first week that AP was out. People are going to be off him, and I still think I trust the talent there. I still think he has big potential, particularly as it pertains to going against the Lions. I think that's a really good spot for him. And then Asiata was underperforming the last couple of weeks, so could certainly see him have a big week if the volume is there, but he's more of a GPP option.
Yeah, definitely. He's a GPP option, and I probably just won't use him simply because I'm using West and West in that price range.
West and West, yeah.
I do have a couple all West lineups, so it was like the week the Benjamin and Benjamin lineup on the Millie Maker. I'm hoping the West and West lineup does this week.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. We have Roethlisberger officially active.
Yeah. It seems like everybody who is questionable is active that we care about in the 1:00 game. So
except Slay. Slay's the one that's surprising me as a defender, and that's the one that I'm going to have the biggest response to, because I really like Diggs and already had him a ton. I might just make this a Stephon Diggs week where I just go all in on him, because I think he's going to be underowned relative to his potential.
Yep, and now I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to get more Diggs in, because I don't really want to drop down any of my Allen Robinson. I don't want to drop down any of my Green Bay wide receivers. If I do,
There's so many options in that range.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe I drop down a couple. I don't have much, but I have a couple Manny Sanders or like Demaryius Thomas shares, because it is a good matchup against Oakland, and I like having in the Millie Maker. I like having a couple players in that last game so that you can, if you do somehow have a lineup that is in contention for a really strong finish, you can kind of game theory it where, well, if everybody else has the same player I do and I'm behind them, I can at least pivot to somebody else. So that's the only reason I tend to have a little bit more of the night game than other people. But in this case, it's also a really good matchup. So I'm just trying to figure out where my extra Diggs is going to come from. And I'm just having a hard time being like, well, I want less of this guy or I want less of that guy, because I'm already pretty narrow. I don't have any stills like I wanted. I only have one or two Kenny Britt lineups. I only have one or two Ted Ginn lineups. So even the guys I'm taking shots on, I don't have a ton of, and I don't think I can drop them a whole lot. So I want to have more Diggs. Let me kind of.
No, that's fair. I probably
queue it up.
The more I look at this, I think I'm going to have that problem as well because I like a lot of those receivers in that 5,500 to 5,900 range.
Yeah, Moncrief, etc.
What's that?
I would say, yeah, like Moncrief, etc.
Yeah. And then even a little bit higher, I mean, getting some Allen Robinson, like you said, Jarvis Landry, someone I'm getting in my lineups at 7,100. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough to just lock in one guy. A comment in the chat, Ty Montgomery, Adams, and Diggs as kind of a trio. That's one of my cash lineups, and my main cash lineup right now has those three. But I think what ends up happening there is you're not on Antonio Brown enough. That's another name that I just want to go back to. 8,900. We know that Roethlisberger's playing. It's a phenomenal matchup against the Ravens secondary. I might try and get Antonio Brown into my cash lineups too right now. So
I'm not playing Antonio Brown in cash. I don't think I'd much rather play Le'Veon Bell in cash than Antonio Brown in cash. But obviously in GPP you need to have Antonio Brown. That's definitely like I can't drop any of my Antonio Brown shares, otherwise that's just stupid. So, but I'm with you. In cash, I don't have Tymo and Adams and Diggs. I have Tymo, Adams, and Moncrief. So it's just whatever floats your boat in terms of that mid range, and I can definitely see using 3 wide receivers from that mid range. But even then, there's still other wide receivers at other price ranges. Cooks, Antonio Brown, we mentioned, Dez, Allen Robinson. I mean, a lot of guys this week that are options. So it's hard for me to. I already have 30. I just looked it up. I have over 33% Diggs. I have 11 of like 30 lineups or something with Diggs in them. So I can't really fit in too much more Diggs.
Yeah, fair enough. Any last thoughts? Anything you're kind of thinking in terms of closing up here?
No, I definitely need to close up. I got another show I'm appearing on just after the top of the hour. So,
cool. Where's that at? Where can we find it?
Oh yeah, that's a good call. So it's at the Fantasy Sports Network. It's on FST Live. So it's FN Fantasy. It's like, but with no vowels. So like I'm not a good speller. I'm a math guy.
FNTSY.
Yeah, Fantasy Sports Network. So look it up there. It's their fantasy live show. And they're based in Canada, so you probably won't be able to see it because it's like a Canadian TV type thing, online TV. But if you want to pay the money to watch it this week, then you'll be able to see me.
Fantastic. Yeah, make sure to check that out. For me, I'm going to jump on to some lineup building right now as well. So we're gonna close up here. Appreciate all you guys watching. Thanks for all the great notes in the chat. Thanks for all the questions. Really appreciate you guys. If you're not a RotoViz subscriber yet, you want to get a 30% discount, go to rotoviz.com/podcast. We're already discounted for the rest of the season subscription, and you can then get an additional discount there. So definitely worth jumping into some RotoViz content for the rest of the year. Or also, as we mentioned, there's the NBA content starting up. You can jump into that as well at rotoviz.com/NBA podcast. It'll get you a 30% discount on the NBA product as well. So I think that's all we got here. Appreciate you guys watching, and have a good week 9.
Take care, guys.